Welcome to episode 5 of Real Estate with the Carters. If today is your first time watching, I'm Annalyn Carter,
And I'm Christopher Carter.
and together we are the
Carters.
Carters. Hello, I would love to say, or we would love to say thank you for all of our subscribers, for everyone that's leaving comments, and everyone who has contacted us and said that this is great content. We definitely appreciate you guys. Thank you for the love and support that you've been giving us. We would love for you though to share share the site, share the videos, I would say. Share the videos with your friends, your colleagues, right?
Your
So
families, even with your enemies. I mean, we work with just about anyone. We're on our way to 100 subscribers. We started out a month ago, and we're now, I think, our subscribers count to this point is 62, I
yes.
believe.
So our goal is to get to 100 by the end of the week. So
I don't think the end of the week is let's say by the end of July.
by the end of July.
All right,
Oh,
so
come on,
let's try and
go.
target for the end of July to get to 100 subscribers. So for those out there who have watched our videos and who have not yet subscribed, now it's your opportunity to do so. Please subscribe, please like, share, and the notification bell. Please click it so that you can be notified whenever we upload a video.
All right.
All right. We're really happy, truly happy for your support, and we'll be continuing making these videos. All right. So
Today we're gonna dive into today's topic, and it's gonna be about renting.
renting. All right.
Yeah. So a lot of people during the pandemic sold their properties, so they have to go in this whole market of renting, and they're not used to that because they've lived in their home for a long
For a
time,
long time.
right? And for people who can't afford to potentially buy a
At this
property right
time,
now,
right.
so we're gonna go discuss the steps and your right as a tenant, and we're gonna go from a tenant perspective and also
Right.
from the landlord's perspective.
All right, bear in
Right.
mind too that we'll be discussing this from private renters, not really. We're not taking into consideration like apartment complexes and those kind of renting. These are just mom and pops, single family condos, private owners. Correct?
Okay.
All right.
All right.
So without further ado, let's jump right in. Walk us through your process.
All right, so the first thing as a tenant, what you want to do is to figure out what your budget is, right?
Okay.
Figure out how much home you can afford to rent, right? So you're gonna go through your financials, see what you spend money on a monthly basis, and figure out how much money you can afford to pay rent, right?
Yeah.
So also knowing that rental, when you're renting a property, it comes with some upfront costs
Okay.
and some recurring costs. Some of the upfront costs will be like a rental application. You have to come up with your down payment or moving costs, come up with a moving cost. And then
Right.
you also probably have to come up with move in costs and then move in costs, whether you're going to move
Right.
from one city to another city or you're moving from one state to another state.
Right.
Right.
And also to add to that too is that most renters, especially in Florida, requires first, last, and security to move in.
Yes.
So usually that's 3 times whatever the rent is just to move in. So
Right.
you have to take that into consideration when preparing to move.
Right. And then another thing too that you want to make sure is that when you're going to be renting, in order to prepare yourself, is to do like a rental screening, right? So whomever that you're going to be working with is going to potentially do an application, do a screening, and the screening is going to involve like checking your credit. It's going to check your rental history and potentially check your criminal history, right?
Right. So it's credit, um,
Credit, rental history, as in if you had an eviction
right,
before, and then your background
criminal
check will check your
background.
criminal background.
Okay. And
Right.
we highly emphasize doing that screening prior to start looking at properties because it gives us an idea of where you can be placed. So, for instance,
Right.
if your score is in a 600 and you're looking at a community that requires 700, then we may
That
have
would
some
be a good
issue.
Right.
So
Because
it's
it will be hard
best,
to place you there because they're not
right?
going to approve you.
So
Right.
it's best to ensure that you do the screening first, gather your pay stubs, calculate how much you can rent, prior to start looking at properties. Also, if you're gonna be having a co-renter like a husband or wife, a friend, a family, if you know you're renting together, you want to also do the screening and gather the information for that person also, so that when you talk to the realtor and you can provide the necessary documents for them to assess what you're qualifying for and
What your income is.
where they can place you.
Right. And a
All
way
right.
to so that you know for the income, there's ways for them to verify that you can either use your pay stubs,
Correct.
right? You can use W-2s. If
Right.
you're self-employed, you use bank
Bank
statements. And
statements.
they
Right.
typically ask for like 3 months of bank statements to prove
Correct.
your income,
Right.
right?
And for on the pay stub, they usually ask for the last 30 days.
Right.
Right. If
Right.
you get paid bi-weekly, so that would be two sets. If you get paid weekly, that would be four sets of pay stub.
Correct, correct,
All right.
right? And
Okay.
like Chris was saying, it's important to know where your credit score is. So typically, you have these online was a TransUnion. You can
Right.
check or Equifax or
Um,
sometimes Credit Karma on
Credit
your phone.
Karma.
It's not
Right.
going to be an exact score that they're going to give you. Credit card is not going to be an exact score, but it'll give you like an idea,
Correct.
right?
It's
So
good. It's at least a starting point for you
right,
to have an idea of where you are. Because again, in Florida, most of the places, most of the communities may have credit score requirements.
right,
Right? There are parts where there's no credit score requirement, but for the large part, at least 60 to 70% of all the communities, especially in South Florida here, there's credit score requirement.
and not to cut you off, and I think it's because a lot of people ask, why do they need to know what my credit score is? I think credit score is like an history to what your how you as a person pay your bills. So
Correct.
it's like it's what would you call
It's
it?
an
It's
indicator
an
to the
indication
tenant,
to
to
the
the
landlord,
landlord, that this is a person that, wants to pay their bill or pays their bills
bill
on
on
time,
time, right?
and so they'll be more comfortable
Right,
renting to you because you pay your bill on time.
right,
Also, there's two aspects to this credit score. One is that the landlord may want to know what score you have, so that to be more happy renting to you. But then also, if there's an
association,
association that is attached to that community, then that association may have their own score requirements. So that while the landlord may be more lenient, usually on the association side, there's more hard fast rules regarding credit. For instance, there are communities in South Florida here that they require 700 credit score.
right,
They may require all the parties on the lease to have a 700 score. So it may
right.
require only the main person. It's community by community. So it's best that we have that information up front, and then we'll be better able to assess where to place you.
Right. Okay. So once you go through that whole process of trying to figure out what you can afford and knowing what the application, getting your security deposit, also one of the things in terms of cost, if you have a pet, there's some landlords that do or an
Correct.
association that has a
Pet
pet
fee.
deposit, right?
Right.
So the pet fee can be refundable or non-refundable. So those are
Right.
things that you have to consider too in terms of the cost when you're going to be renting a
And
property.
just to add to that, even the size of the pet and the kind of pet too, because there's some communities that don't take dog over 50 pounds.
Right. So
There-
there's
Right.
restrictions.
So if you have a pet, you want to kind of at the beginning notify whoever you're working with that I have a pet. This is the size of the pet. If it's a support pet, a support
Support
service
service dog
dog,
or
then
emotional support dog.
right, all of that makes a big difference to where they can place you. So you want to kind of get all of that involved up front.
Right.
All right.
Okay. So the next step would be for me with location or finding where you want to be in terms
Okay.
of if you want to be close to transportation, if you want to be in an urban where a lifestyle where everything it's walking distance, right? Or if you have children, if you have to be in a certain school district because you don't want to take your child out of a certain district for when you're going to rent. So, finding the location where you want to be in terms of transportation, whether you need to be a close proximity to a school or work, right? and
Correct.
also overall if you want to be in a safe community,
Right,
right?
right. And it's just dependent too because sometimes you can go like further west, usually find more gated communities. If you
Okay.
don't want to be in a gated community, you probably want to stay further east. It's also if you want to be in a condo as opposed to a townhouse, as
Townhouse.
opposed to a single family, because all of that is going to affect the price, right? And
Correct.
where you can be in terms of for your score and all of that. So again, you want to get that information or give that information up front to your realtor and so that they know exactly where you can be placed.
Right.
All right.
Right. So once we go through those first two steps, right, you find a place. Now you want to go ahead and put an offer into this property, right? So now it becomes where the property is listed for a certain price. You probably want to negotiate,
Okay.
right?
Right.
Now your realtor is going to negotiate for you the price of the property. But in today's market, there's
Right.
little negotiation that's actually taking place because the properties are it's very competitive now for renters,
Right.
right? So in a market where a rental is also the same competitive as if you're buying a home. So properties are listed at what is the market, the landlords are looking to get market value for their
I know just that, as you said, it may be so competitive that the landlord may receive 5, 10, 10, 15 offers. And so for you to get that particular property, you may have to go above and beyond what they're asking. We have
right,
also seen cases where if your credit score is not where the landlord needs to be, then you may want to, add an extra deposit, give an
right,
extra deposit, or you may go a little bit more on the price just to kind of give her some, some comfort that she should take your offer. So as Anne rightfully said, it's very competitive in the rental market, just as it is in the buying market. So you definitely want to get all of that information out.
yes,
All
right.
right. You mentioned putting in an offer. Usually, what's that process looks like?
All right, so put in an offer would be for the if you're working with the realtor, they'll put together which is called like a contract to lease, where they're gonna submit an offer to the landlord based on the terms. They're asking for 3 months up front.
Right.
If they're asking for two security deposit, like Chris said, the offer will be if you have a pet, you're gonna state the terms and
Okay.
also whatever the terms the landlord is asking for,
Right.
you're going to put an offer based on those terms and negotiate. Before we do this too, when you go look at the property, you have to look inside the property and see if you guys need to make it, the landlord needs to make any repairs or they
Right.
need to do any cleaning and stuff, so you put that in the offer that you're going to submit to the landlord.
Okay. In
All right.
addition to the contract to lease that Anne just suggests, you also um, gonna have to also submit like proof of income, pay stubs, copies of screening. So both your tenant evaluation. So whether or not whichever one you use, you're gonna also need to submit that. And then if you have like a pet, sometimes they also want
Require
pictures
a
of the
pet.
pet
Right.
and all of that to put together. So in putting together the lease, the contract to lease, which is an offer to the landlord to say, I'm interested in renting this property, and these are my terms, and these are my supporting documents.
Right. So on paper, like he said, you want to prove your income,
Right.
right? With either getting your pay stubs. If you're self-employed, you'll get 3 months bank statement is what they require. If they probably require so the last 2 year taxes, your tax return, right? So those things are what's going to prove your income.
Right.
Along together with the rental screening that shows if you had a prior eviction
Correct.
or if your eviction record is clear, what your credit score is, and a background screening to see if you have any criminal records,
Correct.
right?
So
So
all of those documents are
put to,
submitted, put
right to
together
the
and
landlord,
submitted to the landlord. Right.
right?
And
So
then once the landlord make a decision,
right, once the landlord makes a decision, then he's gonna provide you with it's called a lease, right?
okay.
So the landlord will provide you with a lease,
And
and
what is generally included in the lease?
so the lease talks about anywhere from again who's going to be living at the property, who's responsible for paying the rent. The lease also talks about what you as a tenant is responsible for,
Okay.
what the landlord is responsible for. It talks about whether or not at the end of the lease. Well, before I go to that, it talks about if you can terminate the lease before the end of the lease term. And typically in the state of Florida, a lease is probably about a year, right? That's a long-term lease. So a long-term lease could be a year. So sometimes in the lease, it needs to talk about how long. If you wanted to terminate the lease before the end of the lease, right? That's going to be there. The lease is going to indicate if you can have a guest and how long the guest can stay at
Right,
the
right,
property, right? And like again, I stated before, it's gonna show what you as a tenant is responsible for and what the landlord is responsible for in terms of like say, if it was a townhouse, if you're gonna be paying utilities, if it comes with cable, if
Okay.
you're gonna if the repairs in terms of like say if the appliances break down, are you gonna be taking care of that yourself, or if they're in a minimum amount that you have to cover before you contact your landlord
Right,
in case if
right.
there's an emergency, who you contact if you can't get hold of your landlord. The things of that sort would be indicated in the lease,
Okay. All right.
right?
So the lease is comprehensive as it should address all of those issues.
Right.
Okay. All right.
Right.
And so we get the lease. We sign. We're okay with the terms, and we sign. Where do we go from there?
Once you get the lease, if there's a property too that's in an association, right? Because typically most of the homes in Florida, like we stated, or in an association, you have to apply to the association to get approved. And that process will take about maybe, it can go anywhere from 1 to 2 weeks or up to 4 weeks, right?
Okay.
Because each association is different. So the processing for them to get you approved varies on association,
Okay.
right? And
Okay.
that's something that's out of the control of the landlord. That's just a process that you have to go through, but you can't move into the property until you get approved by the
All right.
association.
Just to add to that too, I know for some of the properties that we've dealt with, there's sometimes a rush fee on
Where you can
the
expedite it.
expedite the application
Sure.
process for the association. So that may be something that you want to consider
Right.
if you're in you're in a situation where you need to move faster or
Right.
sooner. All right. So we've applied to the association. We've gotten our lease. Where does the process go?
All right, you could apply to the association. You got your lease. So the next step after that will, before you move in, is to do a walkthrough.
Okay.
You're gonna do a walkthrough of the property with you and the landlord, or you're an agent, to
Right.
make sure that the property is in the condition that you saw it before, or whatever you had requested when you submitted the offer. If there
Right.
needed to
Right.
be paint or clean. A lot of the times then there's properties that you go to, it's not in a move-in ready condition. So you're gonna request, and hopefully the landlord will get the property move-in ready. They contacted the cleaning company. They came in, they cleaned, they repaired post the previous tenant that was there.
Correct,
Like they
correct.
do some upgrades, to the property. So that way
Right.
when you move in, all you probably have to do is just go in and probably do your own cleaning, because it's never clean enough. It's
Right.
just never
Right.
clean enough. So, you're going to probably hire your own cleaning company, but you want to make sure that when you do your walkthrough, the property's in a condition, because whatever condition you move in, that's going to
Right.
be the condition that the landlord wants the property back when you're moving out, when you're doing
Correct.
your walk out.
Okay, you move
Okay?
out.
Your
All
move
right,
out.
just to add to that too is that the purpose of the walkthrough, that initial walkthrough with you, the landlord, your realtors, or whoever is representing you, is to ensure that you document whatever issues are there. Make sure that you take pictures. Make sure you write them down. You send email, because usually when it's time to move out is when there's an issue, and then the landlord may say, okay, that mark that is there, that wasn't there initially, but if you have something to show that, okay, that ceiling tile was already torn down, that bathroom, the knob was missing, and they would not then have any grounds to hold on to your deposit,
Right.
because a part of this process is when you're moving out, if there's damages,
Right.
then the landlord is going to want to hold
Subtract
back.
what, right, or take money from your deposit, right,
Correct.
to make the necessary
So
whatever repairs.
so that walkthrough is totally important so that you can document whatever issues you have with the properties when before you move in, and either those issues are addressed or you take note of them so that at move out, the landlord don't want to charge those repairs to you.
Right. And this is where too where you ask the landlord too if you want to make some like necessary like upgrades or, hang a TV from the wall. You want to find out from the landlord if it's okay. And like
Right.
he said, to document that, because sometimes for example, if you decide that you wanted to go in the kitchen and probably change the knob because it's not to your liking, then you may ask for the landlord's permission and make sure it's okay with him and document it.
Right.
Because sometimes when you move out, if it's not to their liking, you'd have to remove whatever it is that
Right.
you've done to
Right,
this
right.
property.
And it's going to be at your cost.
Right. So if it's
Right.
not and he's not satisfied with it, he's going to take the money from the deposit, right,
Right.
to make whatever repairs he would want to make before and refund you the difference.
Right. So
Right.
again, that walkthrough with the landlord and your representative is utmost important because it
Yes.
serves you at a time of move out. Now, as it relates to my deposit, how does that work?
As it relates to your deposit, right? So, well, we didn't talk about like the initial deposit that you made.
Correct,
So you
right.
made an initial
Who
deposit.
keeps that initial
The initial
deposit?
deposit is typically held by an escrow agent, right?
Right.
So an escrow agent, whether it's the agent that you're working with or an escrow company, they hold that money, right? And that deposit that you gave them is going to go towards the move-in,
Correct.
the move-in
Moving
costs,
costs.
right?
Okay.
That goes towards your move-in costs. Because
Alright.
typically when you come after you got your lease and you're doing a walkthrough, you're only you're responsible bringing the last and the security deposit.
Okay.
Right?
So
The last month
so
rent
that initial deposit
could
goes
go through
towards,
the first month, or it could
Okay.
go through maybe the deposit, right?
but it goes towards one of those. It's not.
Yes.
They don't keep that.
No, it doesn't.
Okay.
No, it's not kept that. It's
All
go
right.
towards that. It goes towards the 3 months that they're asking for you to move in with.
All right. And you're
Right.
saying too that deposit, once I move into the property, that deposit is maintained by the landlord?
That deposit is maintained by the landlord. They're either supposed to put it in a non-bearing account, or an account where it bears interest. If they put in an account that bears interest, that interest is supposed to go to you
Oh,
at the end.
so-
It
okay.
should.
Okay.
The interest should go to you.
Oh,
Right?
okay,
Right. But
okay.
if it's in a non-bearing interest account, which I think it would be best for the landlord, right, to
Right.
put the money there. So once you move out, that money, the deposit goes to you.
All right. Also, I know that if there's repairs that needs to be done, then the landlord needs to give you an itemized list of what repairs and the cost, so that you can clearly see
Exactly.
what was repaired, what was the cost, and then that difference should be given back to you at move out or at some time frame, within 30 or 45 days after you move out.
Exactly.
Right, so that
Right.
the landlord can't just hold on to your deposit forever. They have to either give it to you back within that window, or if they're going to take from it, they have to explain, itemize what they're taking from it, and refund you the difference.
Exactly.
Right.
Right.
So this has truly opened up our eyes in terms of renting. It's serious business.
Oh yes, it is. It
It's
is.
almost
it is.
like
It's almost like buying a home.
All
It
right.
is. It is. There's a lot of, like you said, there's requirements that they have.
Right.
There's restrictions if you're in association. So these are things that you have to figure out before you even start going to look at properties, because
Right.
sometimes you may start looking at a property and that property may not fit your criteria or your score requirement or your income
Okay.
that you make
Definitely.
may not fit this property that you're trying to rent. So it's super important to know a lot of these things up front, so it doesn't because I know when most renters, they wait until the last minute before because you're busy. You're busy. Life happens. So
Right.
you're trying to look for a place and trying to find something in a hurry, And so it's important that if you gather all these information, you know this upfront, it'll make this transition a lot easier and more effective and efficient for you.
Okay.
Right?
All right. So we're gonna go to a quick break.
Yes. Okay.
Join us back as we explore from the landlord
Landlords.
perspective renting in 2023. All right. See you soon.
Life is full of challenging decisions. Finding the right mortgage company should not be one of them. We at Loans Hub Mortgage and Finance are leaders in residential mortgages, refinancing, and investment property financing. We have a loan solution for your every need. Call us today at 954-947-8662, or you can find us online at www.loanshublending.com. Your next approval is just a phone call away. Loans Hub is an equal housing lender and MLS 222-0747. Welcome back to episode 5 of Real Estate with the Carters. I'm Annalyn Carter,
And I'm Christopher Carter.
and we've been discussing the process of renting.
Right.
So we've talked about, budgeting for a rental, the application process, the screening process, if there's an association, how to get approved, gathering your income, knowing what your credit score is, and, signing the lease and doing the walkthrough. So Chris is going to discuss, I guess, from the landlord perspective,
Right.
now that you have a rental property, and what are the steps and things that he needs to consider as a landlord when trying to rent a property.
All right, so let me just jump right in. So usually, for most landlord, the main reason to have this rental property is a couple of stuff. The main one is income, right?
Right.
So you bought this property either recently or you have had it for a while and you're renting it. One of the main thing you want is that monthly income.
Right.
Then a part of it also is you want to diversify your investment portfolio. So if you're like invested in stocks, mutual funds, real estate is just another way of diversifying, another avenue of creating wealth. And the third is wealth creation through equity build-up. So when you own a property, you bought a property for 200,000. You have it for 5 years. It grow at they appreciate at a rate of say 6%. So within 5 years, you could move from say 200,000 to 220, 230. So that equity 230 is wealth you're building. And the last but not least, one of the benefits of owning an investment property is tax write-off.
Okay.
So if you do like major capital repairs, like you change the AC, do repair, all of those are write-offs that you can get. Talk to your tax person and see you may be leaving money on the table, not utilizing some of these write-offs. All right. Some things to consider when owning a rental property is how do I get this property rented, right? You may either go through an agent, you may employ a listing agent to rent this property for you, or you may want to do it yourself, right? But that's something definitely you want to always consider. How am I going to rent this property out? How do I get the rent? How do I collect the rent, right? Do I go there to ask for the rent every month? Go knock on the door, boom, boom, boom. Where's the rent? Or I set up a bank account where that rent goes to every month. So you kind
or
of
have a property management company too,
Right,
that can
right.
take care of that for you.
so you always want to consider how does that process look like? Stuff like vacancies. So you may have a tenant that moves out, and then it takes a while for you to get a new tenant. If you have, so there's gonna be some vacancies, right? You want to kind of have a plan in place how to deal with that. If you have a mortgage on the property and you have to be paying that mortgage, whether or not there's a tenant, then you want to make sure that you have some provision set aside, either 6 months of the mortgage payment. But you want to make sure that that doesn't creep up on you, and then you find yourself in a place where you have this mortgage to pay, but you don't have an income coming in.
Right.
All right. And the last thing you want to consider is, do I want to deal with eviction? Because invariably at some point you may have a tenant that is not paying.
Okay.
What do? Do you Do you understand the legal issues that comes with it? Are you going to employ a lawyer to help you evict this person? So you want to kind of be very mindful of all of that process prior to renting this property. All right.
Okay.
Now, what are some of the costs associated with owning a rental property? The main one is a mortgage if you have a mortgage, right? That is probably about 30-40% of the cost, right?
Okay.
If there's a mortgage. Now, utilities, depending on how that is, maybe that's a responsibility of the tenant. There's some complex or that
Communities that
communities,
like water
right?
may be included in the rent,
Correct. So you
right?
have to kind of understand that process. And do you want to transfer the electric, the utilities in the name of the tenant, or do you want to keep those in your name? So
Right,
those are
because
some
that can be an
stuff.
issue too, right?
Correct.
Having the utility in the tenant's name, because if they move out and they don't pay, who's
Right.
you're held responsible for that,
Correct.
right?
Right.
I know in the city of Miramar, yeah, what they've done recently done is that they kept the utility, the water, for example, in the landlord's name.
Right.
So
Okay.
what happened is the landlord would probably give the tenant access to that account number, and then the tenant will go in and pay that
Okay, but
pay that
it's
water bill.
maintained
It's maintained
in
by the
the
landlord.
that account has to be
Yeah,
maintained by the
yeah,
landlord.
but the
Okay.
right,
Then you also have to consider property tax. Now, if it's a rental property, you the reprieve you get as with a primary resident don't apply to rental property. So that tax you have to pay that full taxation, right? So you wanna that's a part of your cost. Other costs is repairs, upgrades, general maintenance. You wanna have money set aside. Invariably, something is gonna go wrong.
right.
Invariably, something's gonna break. The fridge, the AC, the something, and you don't want to just this creep on you, and before you know it, you have a $4 or $5,000 cost that you never budgeted for.
Or
That's a
even
part of
like
the cost.
right, or even consider getting a company that would do those services. So that I mean that would be a cost too
Right,
that you'll consider. Like instead of doing those by yourself,
right,
you can hire a service company that will
definitely.
come in, right, to
And the
see which one is more feasible.
last but not least is property management. Do you want to manage this property yourself, or do you want to hire a property manager to manage it for you? If you hire a property manager, obviously there's costs associated with that. So you definitely want to consider whether or not you want to take this on, along with all the other stuff that you have to do, your job, your kids, your family, church, just all of that, and then take on this responsibility of managing this rental property, or you want to pass that responsibility on to a property management company. All right, so some of the responsibility of the homeowner is time commitment to this property. Do I have time? Can I, if every time something is wrong, can I go over to the property to check? Do I have that time? Do I have the time to go when it's vacant to go show new tenants?
Right.
When all of that takes time. So you want to make sure that you have time. You have time on your hand to manage this process. If not, it's best that you pass that responsibility over to a property management company.
Right.
Repairs. Can you make the repairs yourself? Because invariably something is gonna break,
Right.
but there's a cost to having a service company come in and do the repairs every time. Say for instance, there's a leak. Every time there's a leak, it may cost $200-300 for a plumber to come in. Can I do some of that repair myself, right?
Right.
Or if I can I find some alternative way of not
Or getting a
having
little handyman, right?
right, right,
Finding a reputable or someone that you have that you can call and that will take care of these things. Because
correct.
like Chris said, those it could be costly.
Yeah, those add up in quick time. Do add up.
Yeah.
Or then the third responsibility of the landlord
Landlord.
rather is the understanding of state and local laws regarding renting. Tenant landlord, there's rules, there's regulations.
Everyone has a right.
You can't just
Landlord has a
change.
right.
Right. You can't just change the keys
Or the
to the
locks will
prop.
just pop up at the property at any
Right. You
time?
can't just show up there at any time. So you have to understand all the rules regarding tenant landlord relationship or governing that transaction, so that you don't find yourself a foul of the laws and then you're sued by the tenant. All right.
Okay.
Third thing you want to do, you want to understand if your property is in an association, you want to understand the rules and regulation regarding that association. Some associations, I know particular one in Myanmar, you only can rent it one time for a calendar year. So if the tenant moves out in January, you rent it in January, something went wrong, the tenant decide that they don't want to stay, they're moving out in January, February, March, you can't rent it for the rest of the year. Now, if you're depending
Oh,
on that
that's
income to either supplement your personal income or to pay a mortgage on the property, not being able to rent it for 5 6 months could put you in disaster. So you
that's
definitely want
serious.
to understand that
The
if the
community that you're buying in.
right, if there's any association involved with that community, you definitely want to understand the rules and regulations regarding that community.
Okay.
Going back to some of the laws, you have the Fair Housing Act, the Fair Credit Reporting Act. Those are some of the laws that are going to affect the tenant landlord relationship. So you definitely want to get yourself some information and get yourself a price of those laws. Now, preparing the rental property for your tenants. Now, it's within the laws in any of the state that the client or the tenant must be livable.
Habitable.
Right. So you don't want a situation where you're renting a property that the regulators may see that based on the nature, based on the condition of this property, you're not meeting the simple livable standard, right? So you want to make sure as it relates to those issues, then your property is in good standing. All right. Third things, just a tip to you in terms of homeowners is that most of these issues regarding the properties, if you get a property manager or a property management company that has some experience in putting the rules and regulations or just having an understanding of the rules and regulation, that can help you. You may not have to employ them for the duration of the lease, but you can probably have a upfront agreement
Agreement.
where they come in and they help you in the initial process, and then
Mm-hmm.
you take over. Whatever you decide, just remember that there are fees, there are costs, and so you want to make sure that whatever you're doing, it makes sense as it relates to the property. All right, so now how do you set the price now for your property? Because a part of the lure of owning this property is the income, right? It's the getting this monthly check,
Okay.
right? Now, how do you determine what am I going to rent it for? Now, you can use a
A realtor.
brokerage.
Okay.
You can talk to a
A
real estate
realtor agent.
agent, and they could give you some idea of what's going on. You can either go on Zillow, go on the internet, and do some research for.
Or see what
Um,
the properties in the area are renting
correct,
for. So the
correct,
because you want market value, right?
correct,
You want to rent it for market value, or
right,
you're expecting to rent it for market
correct.
value.
So you want to do some research on the price, what similar properties in the areas are going for before you set that price. You don't want to set it too
Too
far
high,
high, and so that you don't have good tenants or good applicant calling, or you don't want to get
or
set it
you
too
have it.
low.
If it's too high, like you, it maybe sit on the market for quite some time
Quite
before you
correct,
rent it. Like you
correct.
said, if you have a mortgage that you have to pay, that's gonna take away from that. So you want to find
A
a
sweet spot
yeah,
in the middle
there you go, a
price,
sweet spot, right,
right? Where
where you
you're
list it.
right. Okay. Um, Now, how do you get good tenants, right? So that's very important because believe me, if you want to get yourself frustrated, get yourself a bad tenant, right? Tenant that doesn't pay on time or tenant that doesn't want to pay,
go through that eviction
and then you're gonna have to
process.
go to that eviction. So, as Anna had mentioned in the initial part of the process, there's a screening process, right? You check credit, background, eviction,
Income.
income. But as a landlord, you also can set your own standard. For instance, you may say, I'm only accepting applicants with 700 credit scores and they have to make three things. So you want to kind of sit down and kind of prepare what your prospective tenant should look like.
Right.
Not how they look in terms of their physical appearance, because that could run you in foul of the laws, right?
Right. No
But in
discrimination,
the
but just
right,
based on
but based on
um
income, criminal issues, eviction issues, you want to make sure that you have an idea of what you're looking for, so that you, when you get applications, you know how to sort through them, and so that you're selecting the most appropriate tenant for your property. All right. Amenities for your properties too. So you want to make sure that for your property, you're not it's not you're not going to be living there, and so it doesn't need to have all the bells and whistles, right? Because all of that is going to come with a cost. So if you buy a property and you put ceramic tiles and
I see what you're
all
saying.
all of that stuff in, remember that tenant may not take care of those stuff the way you'd like, and it may be costly to maintain. So you want to, when you go into a property, you want it must be livable, but you also want to weigh the costs, because if you add all of this to the property, is it going to bear that much more in terms of what it can be rented for? All right.
Well, that's something that you consider when you're doing the upgrades, though. If you're gonna,
Correct.
and then like you say, you want it to be marketable, so you're
Mhm.
competing with other rental properties out there. So you want it to have it like upgraded in terms of up to date. Yeah,
Mhm.
as long as it's up to date, right? It doesn't
Right.
have like he says porcelain floors or
Right. Right.
yeah, but just it's upgraded and it's
Right.
something that's
It's
it's
decent. It's
decent, right?
livable.
It's livable,
It's livable.
right?
And so again, you have to weigh the cost to the benefit. If the cost is 50,000, I'm only getting an extra $50 a month. Maybe that is not a good investment at this time, right? So you definitely want to take those things in consideration. Now, collecting the rent. One of the things that you want to ensure is that you make that process very easy,
Okay.
right? Again, for most people that rent, the rental income plays a significant part, either augmenting their personal income or
Mm-hmm.
being used to pay the mortgage for the rental property. If you make that process as seamless and as easy as possible for the tenant, it's only going to help that process, right? So
Right.
you want to have a from the onset, you want to have a clear and precise way of collecting this rent. All right,
Right.
I'm going to come every Monday at 5, or here's an account, and by Monday or first of the month or up to the third or whatever,
Right.
the money is deposited in the account. But you
And they
want to
have
make
easy way of doing that now. So now you can either
correct,
Venmo or Zelle,
that correct,
right? Right. So those are ways you can collect the rent
correct.
easier.
You want to make sure that process is
Mm-hmm.
easy. Now let's go back a little bit to screening. So when you get applicants, you want to make sure that you put some work into screening them and into following through, calling their references. If they are previous landlords, you
Landlords.
want to make some calls. You want to say, hey, I'm about to rent a property to Chris Carter. Is Christopher Carter a good tenant? Do you recommend him as a tenant?
Right.
You definitely want to get as much information on these prospective renters as humanly possible, because that's going to go a far way in ensuring that you collect your rent and you collect your rent on time. All right.
Right.
So you definitely want to do the screening and want to follow through on the screening. If something comes up in the screening, it may not necessarily be a ground to disqualify the client, but it may be a ground to either ask additional question, or you can even ask for additional deposit, or
Right. And right. Can I tell a little story? All right, so Chris made a really good point. Like, contacting like your tenant's prior landlord. There's a particular property that I rented for someone, and when I did the screening, I contacted the prior landlord, and he said that this person paid on time every month. They paid every month, but it wasn't on time.
Right.
And lo and behold, this person within my client, it was the same thing. She pays, but my client was complaining that this lady doesn't pay her rent on time. But I said, we
Right.
disclosed that information to you
Up
before.
front,
We
right.
told you that this is, that, but she doesn't. She pays every month, but she doesn't pay it on time. So they have her habits was
Yeah.
it's the same habit that she
Right.
had with the previous landlord that's she's gonna continue with
Right.
the current
Right.
landlord.
And so it's
So it's
important,
important,
right, to call and get some verification from prior landlord, at least the last two, if
right?
possible, to just get the trend of this tenant. Now, make sure that you have a airtight lease. I can't stress that enough. Every condition that you're that is required, you want it to be addressed in the lease. For instance, or the duration of the lease, the rent amount, when the rent is to be collected, when is the rent deemed late,
Right.
right? Pets, if they're pets, what kind of pets? If there's multiple people living there, if there's friends or family coming over, how long they can stay there.
Right.
Um,
This should be addressed in the lease
Correct.
term, right?
Maintenance, if the tenant is going to be responsible for repairing up to, like, say, the first $250, then that has to be outlined in the lease. So the lease should be very comprehensive. It should cover all the issues or all the areas that you want to be addressed, so that when if there's an issue, then we can go to the lease, and the lease will dictate what should have been, because it's already recorded there.
Right.
Now, let me walk you quickly through some tips I have for the landlords, just to ensure that you have a successful rental. So, the first one is the property that you're choosing. Make sure the property is in an area that attracts good and consistent tenants, right?
Okay. That's
So that's
important.
that's very important. Secondly, make sure you have a very vigorous um, vetting
Process.
process for the tenants, right? Third is make sure the property is livable without making very lavish upgrades, right? You're not gonna be living there. It's not your home. I know it's your rental property, and sometimes we have personal attachment to it, but try not to add too much upgrades that is not going to give you back returns.
Okay.
All right. Resist the urge of renting to friends and family if they're not properly vetted.
Hmm. Good.
Right?
Good gem. Say that again.
Right. Resist the urge of renting to friends and family who are not properly vetted. I'm not saying don't rent to friends and family, but make sure that you take them through that vetting
Process just as
process,
you would do any other tenant that you're
just
gonna put in the
because,
property.
right? Make sure that before and if there's gonna be pets, all of that is included in the
Right.
lease,
Should
right?
we see? I mean, in terms of pet, right? Because most landlords sometimes too think that like they have what is called emotional support or service dogs, right? So as a landlord, you should understand and know what
Right,
the laws are in terms of
right,
allowing someone with a service animal or emotional support, because you can't really you can't
right.
discriminate against that, and you can't also charge a pet deposit for someone who has a service animal,
Okay,
right?
okay.
All right. So those things are important that you're aware of.
All right. Consider using a property management service where you're not able to pay enough time, enough attention to the property. You possibly want to put that responsibility into the hands of someone. All right.
Okay. And what's
Um,
typically a cost for getting a property management? What
it all depends. They have different costs. Some may take a percentage of the rent.
like
Some may take
10%?
10%. It just dependent. But whatever it is, you want to make sure that if that's a route that you're gonna go with, make sure that those costs as opposed to the benefit of getting those services makes sense.
Okay.
Because don't go lavish getting a high paying property management service and then, you know, the rent that you're collecting is not enough to sustain
All right, that's
what you're
true.
doing.
Good point.
All right. Make sure you do a walkthrough with a client on moving. And when they're moving out, you also want to do the walkthrough. Make sure that that walkthrough is
Documented.
documented. I can't stress that enough. Make sure the collection process for the rent is easy. I mentioned that before. You can't stress enough making that process as easy as possible so that there's no excuse on the tenant side for not paying the rent on time. All right, I have a team of professionals that can help with that process, either an eviction attorney, handyman, a property inspector, an accountant, a real estate agent, an appraiser, insurance agent. All of those persons are going to impact um, your process, so you want to at least have a quick dial to any of these persons. You want to repair, you should not wait 2 3 weeks if there's a leak. You want to have someone that you can call, and within a short notice they can go add to the property. So that's definitely important. All right, you want to make sure you have a rock solid lease. I can't stress that enough. Everything that you need should be in the lease. All right. You also want to make sure that you do, as I said before, do a walkthrough and take pictures of the walkthrough beforehand, right? So you have pictures if there's any issues that you understand. Have a good relationship with a tenant. You don't want to have an adversarial kind of relationship with a tenant, because then that is only going to put that situation in a bad light, and they may not treat your property
Right, and having
in a good way if that relationship is not
right,
good.
and have an open communication with them. So in case,
Correct.
like Chris says, if there's an issue, the tenant don't feel afraid to give you a call or let you
Correct.
know what's going on with the property.
All
You know,
right.
because like if you said if there's a leak or something, you want to know right away so that you can take care of that. So having that communication and relationship with them is very important.
All right. The last thing I'm gonna say on this tips for landlords is conduct period walkthrough. You may have a lease for 12 months. You can
Like
have a
six
at
months.
6 months, every 6 months, you
Mm-hmm.
can have a walkthrough. Also, if you're gonna renew that lease, do a walkthrough as if it's a new tenant,
Right.
right? I can't stress that enough, because there may be issues with the property that the tenant did not report, and so you definitely want to make sure that you're aware of whatever issues are going on with your property. This is your investment. You have spent your life saving on acquiring this property. You want to make sure that this property is maintained. We're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we're going to be wrapping up today's episode.
Okay.
Thanks for joining us. See you back in a minute.
Life is full of challenging decisions. Finding the right mortgage company should not be one of them. We at Loans Hub Mortgage and Finance are leaders in residential mortgages, refinancing, and investment property financing. We have a loan solution for your every need. Call us today at 954-947-8662, or you can find us online at www.loanshublending.com. Your next approval is just a phone call away. Loans Hub is an equal housing lender, NMLS 2220747. Welcome back to episode 5 of Real Estate with the Carters. I'm Annalyn Carter,
And I'm Christopher Carter.
and today we were discussing the process of renting. So now we're going to wrap up this whole process of renting a property from the tenant perspective and from the landlord perspective,
Correct.
right? So we went over earlier, as for the tenant, you need to find out what your budget is, you know, what your costs are going to be. You have upfront costs and recurring costs. Some of the upfront costs are the application fee that you have to pay, your move-in amount, which is the first last security, and if there's an association, what causes it to apply to the association,
Correct, correct.
right?
And you also have moving costs if you're to
Right.
move either from out of town or out of state. Then you
Or
are also
across cities,
correct.
right. So those are costs that are associated with that.
Right.
The next step is to prepare yourself and find a location, right? Whether it is you want to be in a proximity close to work, proximity to your children's school, or if you need to be close to public transportation,
Correct,
right?
correct.
Also, in terms of what type of home you want, if you want to live in a condo situation, if you want a townhome, or if you want a single family unit, right? And these different type of properties bring different style of living
And different costs
and
too.
right, and different costs
Right,
associated with it, right?
right, right.
If you're in a condo setting, typically includes, say, some utilities that you don't have to pay, right? If you're in a townhome, the townhome kind of giving you somewhat a single families type of living and a condo type of living, because townhome community come with amenities. So those are things that you're going to consider when you want to rent, right? Once you figure out the cost, where you want to be, and you find that, now you put in a lease, right? Getting a lease submitted, or offer submitted to the landlord. So submitting an offer to the landlord, whether you're going to either hire an agent to help you with that process, right? Getting some documents together for that will be getting your income, proof of income. If you are and if you work for someone, then you'll get your W-2 or your pay stubs. If you're self-employed, you'll get your last three bank statements, and that will prove your income. And to put together a rental screening or police report, whatever the requirements are for this particular landlord or association that you need to submit, right? Once you do that, you're gonna get your lease. So from the tenant, you need to understand in the lease what you're responsible for and what the landlord is responsible for. When it's gonna dictate, or when your rent is due, when you're gonna pay the rent, how you're gonna pay the rent, who you're gonna contact in terms of there's repairs or any emergencies that needs to be taken care of. It also outlines whether or not you can have a visitors and how long visitors can stay at the property, or it also is going to spell out for you in terms of if you want to terminate this contract early, if you can do so, and what cost is associated in terminating your contract early. So those are some of the important things as a tenant that you should know when you're getting ready to rent a property.
Okay.
All right.
Now, from the landlord side, this rental property, we got it for the main reason of the income, right? So one of the things that you want to make sure is that, one, it spells out in the lease the terms and conditions of the all the term, but especially for collecting the rent. When is the rent late? If you need to evict this person, what is the terms for the eviction, in terms of if they want to break the lease, do they need to pay 1 month, 2 months? If they don't pay on time, if they miss it, what are the outcomes? So all of that needs to be spelled out in the lease. Just to recap a couple of the stuff that we went over is on the responsibility for when you own a investment, a rental property. The first thing you want to know is, do I have the time to commit to this property myself? This is a big investment for you. It's a big investment for your family. You don't want to, if you don't have the time to go collect the rent, or if you don't have the time to go show the property if it is vacant, when it's vacant, you don't have the time to go when there's a issue to go over there to take care of that. You may want to outsource that to a property management company. Also, you want to consider repairs. Can I do the repairs myself? Do I have a handyman at hand who's ready
Right.
on my call? You want to make sure that you have a couple of persons, a good handyman, an electrician, a plumber, somebody who can do those kind of work,
Yeah,
a
AC
good
guy.
eviction attorney.
Right.
You want to make sure that you have one close that you can call if there's an issue. All right. Do you understand the state laws regarding renting this property? That's very important. You want to make sure that you're not
Violating
violating any state or federal laws,
tenant rights.
tenant rights regarding this property. So you want to get yourself apprised of that information. Last but not least, if your property is in an association, you want to make sure that you understand the terms and conditions on that the association has set up in order for you to rent this property. One such is the credit score requirement. So if you have a property in an association that requires 700 and above, then you want to know that up front. You want to understand that so that whenever you're advertising a property to rent, you can notify prospective tenants that these are the requirements. This association requires 700. So if your score is 650, then you know there's no use of applying because the association is 700. Like I said, all of these issues are important in maintaining and ensuring that you have a successful rental property. So again, if you can't manage this yourself, you want to either get a property management company involved or you want to get a good real estate agent. Whichever you choose, there's costs associated with it, but the benefits sometimes outweigh those costs.
I agree.
All right?
I agree.
Now, this brings us to the end of today's show. It was a great show.
Yes, it was. Hope it was.
All right, and we're happy to again present you another show, and we look forward to present again next week. Now, please like, share, subscribe.
Yes.
Click the notification bell.
Right.
Comment. If you have questions, feel reach out to us. Now, if you have any question regarding mortgage-related question, my number is 786-985-1383. Again, 786-985-1383.
And if you have any real estate questions, my number is 786-214-1436, or you can email me at analynbrealestate@gmail.com.
All right.
All right.
So thanks a lot for joining us today. Thanks a lot for your comments. Thanks to all our subscribers. Look forward to next week's show. Have a great week.
All right. See you soon.